These are words and they mean the same things, but the letters are different, and here's why. When I was a kid, I always wondered why letters look the way they do. The letters that I wrote looked in one way, and the letters that I read looked in a very different way. And now, 15 years after thinking those thoughts, I have some of the answers which describe why letters look the way they do. And so, please join me in my exploration of that field. I will describe why exactly letters look the way they do when they're printed and in a different way when they're written. I'll describe how that matters to everybody who lives in an urban environment, and I think I'll also describe, finally, a reason for you, as someone who uses a computer and probably types things every now and again, to maintain this information in your mind. I am very, very careful about how I use the trust that you have given me as a viewer, and as such, I will be both brief and citing all of my sources. Okay, let's do it. First, a disclaimer. I speak, read, and write languages that use the Roman alphabet. This is what it looks like. There are a lot of other alphabets of equal value. This is the one that I know, so it's the one that I'm going to be talking about. However, I will not neglect to mention fun facts about others. Our story begins at what may as well be the start of recorded history, and between now and then. For a very long time, writing was something only some people learned how to do. For writing has always been, and may always be, something that is hard to learn and that takes time to teach. The people who did learn how to write did all the writing for everyone else. There would be monks who sat in their monasteries and worked by the daylight so as not to burn their books should an accident happen by candlelight. And so that was the state of the creation of books for a long period of time. Those monks did all the writing for everyone else and they got really good at it. They would write all day. Old books would rot and take their knowledge with them. So the monks copied the books before they disintegrated. These monks had too much to copy. The monks also had all the books that everyone else wanted. The books were sold for very high prices. And one day, a sneaky, conniving swindler appears in a certain place at a certain time, and this sneaky, conniving swindler wanted to scam everyone. He planned to make a machine that would take away the jobs of all of the monks. A machine that would write. And he did it. It worked. There was no honor among thieves. So, his friends started running this scam too. And the ones who were successful in this horrible, awful field, which we now call mechanical printing, well, the successful ones had good text to copy and machines that made good looking letters. And some luck. The monks had been cheated out of their honest profession of writing the same 30 signs over and over. Woohoo. Uh, the printers who ran this scam and continued it for years and years needed to make their machines make the best looking alphabets. Now, the standard of what a good looking alphabet was set by those monks who wrote all day, every day for years on end. The printers did that too. They made letters all day, every day for their machines. They got very good at what they did.
So, with time and energy, they had more power over what letters looked like than the monks did. They made a lot of decisions about what letters might look like. They made a lot of different letters. The very best printers made letters which were both good and distinct. They had what might be called their famous printing house styles. And some people loved this making of letters so much that they decided that they would focus by and large on making letters for other printers. And thus, making good letters for machines became a profession. This is now called the field of typeface design. There are a lot of names that I might drop, and they're generally all European men because this is a story of the Roman alphabet's printing, and so it's European men. You know, Gutenberg, Jensen, Garamond, Caslon, Kies, Baskerville, Dido, Baudoni, Benton, Gaudi, Johnston, von Krimpen, Renner, Frutiger, Zopf, Morrison. Over the 500 years of development which those individuals contributed to, the rest of the world changed a lot. More and more people learned how to write, even people who didn't have to do it a lot. They learned how to write in a way that was perhaps less ornamental than the monks and more quick and businesslike, and yet it's valid and it is text. And so the letters that we write generally as everyday people looks quite different from the ornamental, idealized letter forms which someone spent many, many hours crafting into a mechanized system at a machine of one kind or another. That's why letters look the way they do. I mentioned a few minutes ago that I may only be qualified to discuss at length about the Roman alphabet. That is something that I hold true to in this moment. But I also would like to mention interesting facts about other alphabets, which are perhaps of more interest than what I've already said, because they're not often said at all. The the Koreans moved from a system where every word had its own symbol to an alphabetic system where every sound had its own symbol. In early the early second millennia. It happens to be that the Koreans were also the first to combine mechanical printing with an alphabet. Here's what that looks like. More generally, East Asia beat the world to the punch with printing. The first alphabet that we still have memory of was made under mysterious circumstances in Egypt. The often read Old Testament describes the gifting of the alphabet from divinity, and that's a pretty story. The one we have evidence for is less pretty. It involves slaves working for Egyptians. The oldest alphabet that we have evidence of is Proto-Sinaitic, an ancestor to a lot of different alphabets, including Hebrew. And so, understanding that those were the people that would eventually become those who wrote the Old Testament, maybe there's a little kernel of truth in the story of the Old Testament and the gifting of the word on Mount Sinai. Maybe a little. Um, However, the full truth may simply be that in the beginning there were slaves and slave holders. That would make Nietzsche chuckle. Okay, here are pretty pictures of old alphabets on old things. It looks nice. Just a little bit more about other alphabets and languages. Printing in some languages is a really, really hard problem. And in a lot of languages, this problem wasn't solved until the 20th century. It took a long time to develop a typewriter that would work with an, a language that doesn't do alphabetic scripts. Like Chinese, every word has its own symbol. And so it took a long time to make a typewriter for that. And well, even today, that's it's kind of solved, but through like a phonetic like abstraction above the alphabet developed for European keyboards. Um, now, that may be very difficult, and it's a complicated problem with imperfect solutions, but what may be lost in ease is gained for certain in poetry. And one more. Printing in languages using the Arabic script is complicated and was, like with Chinese, best solved by digital computing. Typewriters were made and quick mechanical printing was possible. However, these iterations lost a lot of what made Arabic writing artful. Digital technology brought art back into affordable Arabic typesetting. Anyway, so that's a short history on why letters look the way they do. Having described how letters got to be so distinguished, it stands to reason to wonder about what happened next. We started printing things other than books. We started putting these printed things everywhere. The Industrial Revolution happened, and printing enabled it. Printing enabled modern advertising. Brand identities became woven into the structure of the city. Propaganda became essential to the spirit of the nation. When a sign is placed in the world, its meaning moves from abstract to concrete. It gains a role in the story of a place, like casting an actor to play a character. In 1850s London, that story featured big letters with intense qualities. In the London Underground, a more soft spoken actor was chosen to represent the character of the place. One author says that the typeface chosen became diffused into the visual fabric of London. In the Toronto subway, a more quirky actor was selected. This typeface was made by someone at some time, and though the source of its identity is mysterious, it is, in all certainty, a part of what makes Toronto Toronto. It is a part of the identity of the place. This lucky typeface went to the moon. Enough said. This typeface, Futura, has been such a strong storytelling device that there's a book dedicated to it. It's not the only typeface with a book. This is another one. Palatino. There is such a thing as casting the wrong actor. A set of scientists made a very important discovery and presented their findings with an actor which might be better used inside of a kindergarten classroom. People notice these kinds of things, much as if an actor known for his gritty performances shows up in a children's TV show, or vice versa. Now, I would not want a Teletubby telling me about very important things, and as such, I'd care about how I receive the information that is given to me. That said, miscasting can be intentional. The typefaces used for highway signage are sometimes used outside of highway signage. It might be found on the side of a can of beer, or on the signage of a theater, perhaps for a shocking effect. People take these actors seriously. Certain typefaces have well-protected reputations. The typefaces used for mathematical writing themselves carry a certain authority that is respected widely, and that within the mathematical typesetting communities is discussed as a real authority to be protected. Okay, here's another example. The company that maintains the identity of the London Underground, Transport for London, is very particular about who gets to share that identity. Another example, Google maintains the very same terms. And it's true they run services that share many fonts. Some fonts are very intentionally excluded from that, including Google Sans, the font used for the Google homepage. Another example. Apple allows anybody to download their typefaces. However, nobody except Apple is allowed to publish anything using them. Okay, enough of those examples. Maybe they all have a point. Yes, it'd be great if we lived in a world where we could share everything. However, it is also true that sometimes it can be tiring to see the same actor playing a lot of stories. This typeface has been used across many different cities. There was someone who was doing a research project and asked for good documentation of many different uses of this typeface. There were enough uses of this typeface to make a book. Okay, this is an unconventional example that I had given, and the one I will give now is perhaps a bit better known. Helvetica. This typeface was so often used in the 20th century that it earned a feature film not entirely in a positive vein. And yet there are counterexamples. Maybe a shared identity is a good thing too. Cooper Black is on Tootsie Rolls and on airplanes. It came from Germany. It made it big in the US. Nobody can say for certain where it will fly to next, but it is sure to remain an important player on the world stage. Here is another famous example of a shared typographic identity. So this one airport in France had their own set of letters commissioned for their signs. The guy who was commissioned to do it was really good at making letters, and those letters worked out really, really well. They worked out so well that other airports wanted to use these letters too. And so many airports have adopted these letters. And the letters are now tied to the in between spaces that airports are. Nowhere in particular. A strange hodgepodge of places and cultures and culturelessness. The letters are very easy to read and reminiscent of many places and no place. They have been adopted by multinational corporations. Microsoft uses these letters. Sony uses these letters. For a time, Apple used these letters. And many universities do too. Now, going from a huge identity down to a maximally local one. There's a shipyard that had a particular style of lettering. That shipyard has been made into a museum. And so, the style was made into a typeface. It was made mechanical. Sometimes a typeface is used on the side of a paper bag and perhaps publicly used seldom ever again. And there are a lot of typefaces that have well-known names and yet are used only on the right occasion. There is a typeface named Windsor, which might be found on the side of a corky can of beer or on the cover of a book by Tom Hanks. It has a certain feel to it that has a real value in the world and yet must be applied with care. A lot of these stories are supremely local, and a lot of these stories are a little bit more than local. A certain city might get a certain typeface made for its wayfinding system. A certain animated TV show might modify a well available typeface for the purposes of the show. Anyway, here's a Hungarian Star Wars poster while all the food for thought processes. All of these stories I've told are about distinct places. The London Underground, Sheffield, airports. Some of these places are just one, and some of these places are varied and spread across the world. Everywhere. It describes the language of a place. That is, as of current, a field of study of interest to some scholars. The words to search for on this study of interest would be semiotics or linguistic landscapes. Every time a typeface is seen on a building, card, or anything tangibly connected to life, it's accruing a place in the story of your life. Those letters are a part of the society. They're a part of the language of the city. They form the linguistic landscape. Viewer, I implore you, here's why you need to remember what I've said. If typefaces are actors, then writers are, well, writers, but also casters. graphic design as viewed by the general public is influenced by the decisions of everyday people. A wholesome understanding of the tacit implications of image is relevant to everybody. Yes, you may choose to use Times New Roman because it's what you've been told to use. However, the work is your own, and a typeface made for a newspaper in the 1920s that even that very newspaper has abandoned probably won't fit 95% of the time, maybe 99% of the time. I mean, there are so many choices, and some of them have something interesting to say, like, yeah, you could cast that actor that everyone's seen before in a role that fits that role very generically. However, you could spend a little bit of time, a little energy, and cast an actor that fits perfectly. The font menu has some good stuff. The internet has some good stuff too. Yeah, I could give you a long list of typefaces. There's probably more value in me telling you where to look for yourself. Who am I to kill the joy of seeking and searching? In that vein, websites that may act as search engines for these subjects include Typecache, TypeAtlas, Alphabets, Fonts in Use, TypeDrawers, and Typographica. Any of these websites that's been up for years and will be active for years to come. Closing remarks. There is no special magic to be found in the letter R of a good typeface. There is value in the relationships between that letter R and the letters S, T, U, and V. I've also made it clear that there's a lot of value between all those letters and the societies they show up in. It's not just me. Sociologists and linguists are teaming up to form the budding study of semiotics and linguistic landscapes. Signs and symbols establish so much of a place's identity that it's become a scholastic cause for concern. It's true that CooperBlack.otf is some amalgam of vector graphics data and copyright information, less than 100 kilobytes of digital information. But again, its connotation has made its value much more than the sum of its parts. Nothing is objective. The reality we care about comes from togetherness. Now please enjoy the wrapper on a Tootsie Roll with a profound sense of reverie. On a personal note, thinking back on my running interests through life, I've had a profound interest in digital identity that's never quite left me. I grew up with computers as an integral part of society. As a kid, I joined internet societies via video games. Animal Jam, Club Penguin, Monkey Quest, Pixel Gun 3D, Call of Duty, Minecraft, and hear me out, Ponytown. As an adult, I interact with internet societies via my website on the NeoCities network. And there's a lot to be said about extending the expression of personality to the digital world. Something that the generation after me is first experiencing through, let's say, Fortnite. That's a thought for another time. Goodbye.